Hey guys, I hope that you guys are having a really wonderful week. Here in the Bress household, we are in week 3 of homeschooling, and so we're finally getting into the rhythm of things. So all my kids are kind of inside having a break from school. There's lots of yelling and screaming, so I am on the front porch today just to talk with you all a little bit about gentleness. I know many of you guys have been following along as we've looked through this passage of scripture from Colossians 3 to look at what it looks like to clothe ourselves with the different characteristics of Jesus. Last week we talked about humility, and we talked about humility is really stemming from a right understanding of ourselves, both in relation to God and what that means that He is the creator of all things, that He created us and is sovereign over all things, as well as a right understanding of our relation to other people and how we look at other people as also image bearers of God, also deserving the utmost dignity because of that. So the humility is ultimately a posture of the heart. And as we kind of walk through that foundational passage, the very next characteristic that we see is gentleness. It's really neat that we see those two things placed together in this verse because they are often placed together throughout the Bible. We see humility and gentleness combined. Jesus himself, when he talks about finding rest for your soul, he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul." So there we see that Jesus himself embodies the characteristics of gentleness and humility, and when we choose to embody those as well, we get rest for our soul. And we see him in a few other places. In Galatians 6, it tells us that when we are confronting other people, other believers in sin, that we are to do it with gentleness and humility. Once again, that humility is an understanding of our own depravity, of how we ourselves are just 2 steps away from being in that very same sinful place. And so coming to them with that humility and that gentleness, which is an expression of that humility, we are far more able to reach their heart and help lead them toward a path of change than if we were to come, shaking our finger and telling them all the things that they're doing wrong. We see gentleness and humility also coupled together when we see a desire to appeal to others. It might not always be sin, but we see Paul asking us to live a life worthy of the calling. And when he does that, he says he's coming to us with gentleness. He came to the church with gentleness and humility. As we engage our opponents, looking at social media, we see a lot of people engaging their opponents. But is that being done with humility and gentleness? That's what we've been instructed to do in Scripture. In 2 Timothy 2:25, it's very specifically talking about how we engage with opponents, and it says to do it with gentleness and humility. And finally, another one that sticks out to me is when people ask us about the hope that we have, it says to always be ready for an answer, but when we give that answer, to do it with gentleness. So here we see that we have this posture of the heart of humility, right? And then we see this gentleness, which is our expression of that humility. So that leads us to what exactly is gentleness. There may be some different conceptions of what it could be, but the biblical conception is equivalent to something called meekness. Now, we see meekness in the Beatitudes in Matthew 5 when it tells us, "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." So we see that it's something that we are supposed to have. But what it means is strength under control. Now, a neat illustration of this is the Greek root of that is actually talking about a military term for horses. Now, they would gather in wild stallions, and some of those stallions would be designated to pull carts. Some would be for racing, and some would be for war. And what they saw in some specific stallions was that they had a fierce spirit, that they were courageous, that they were powerful, but they also had enough discipline that when its rider indicated that it should stop, it would stop. When the rider indicated that it should push further, it would push further. So there was this discipline to respond to the slightest nudge or pressure from the rider's leg. So how does that apply to us? I think it is showing a strength that knows when to assert itself and knows when to pull back and be more passive. Ultimately, it's always guided by the one that we are being directed by, not by our emotions, not by what we're feeling or thinking or what our circumstances are telling us to do, but what is God, the one who should be directing our actions, leading us to do. It is a strength under control. So as we go out this week and we continue thinking about humility, thinking about gentleness, my prayer is that we will pause before we act. We will say, Lord, how are you directing me? And am I exemplifying this meekness, this gentleness, this strength under control in a meaning and valuable way so that our character can be a witness of the world, to the world, of your character. Guys, I hope you are having a wonderful week. If you have not joined us back on Sunday, I hope that you guys are able to very, very soon. If not, I hope that you are logging in to live.life.church every weekend and staying up with the messages. Love you so much, so grateful for you, and I would love to hear what God is doing in your heart as you continue to work through this passage in Colossians 3. Talk to you soon.